Hi, everyone. This is Alisa Dixon, and this is Astrology with Alisa, real talk with my Astro Besties. I'm here today with all my Astro Besties, and we are going to tackle the eclipses. What do people think about when they think about eclipses? For the everyday person, it is when the sky goes dark in the middle of the day, right? It's when one of the lights wipes out the other light, whether the sun goes in front of the moon from the Earth's vantage point, or whether the moon goes in front of the sun, whichever it is, it's eerie. And if you think back to the ancient times when the sun's light just went away and they didn't know that it was going to come back, that this was temporary, and the sun is responsible for food and life and everything. So that's where we get this fear element or the foreboding around eclipses. So today we're going to unpack this and talk about the astrological significance and talk a little bit about how to work with this energy or how to manage this energy and share some real life examples about how some eclipses have really impacted our lives. So let me open it up to everybody in the group here real quick. What do you all think about when you think about an eclipse?
I think about the electromagnetic shift on the planet. When you have the sun blocking the moon or vice versa, the energy here that we typically experience totally changes because that electromagnetic field is blocked from the eclipse. And so it's a totally different energy that we experience here. And the ancients, it was a time of awe and also a time of fear because they didn't know, especially during the solar eclipse, is the sun coming back or is it the end of the world? Even the plants and the birds and the wildlife act different during the solar eclipse. When the moon comes over the sun, suddenly the daytime birds cease and the nighttime birds start. And that's a wild thing to experience in the middle of the day.
Wild is good. That's a good word because it's wild energy with an eclipse.
Yeah.
So that was perfect, right? Go ahead. Who else?
I'll jump in. One of the things that I love about eclipses is I always feel like they shift us. And I created a course a long time ago around the eclipses called Shifting for Gold. So instead of sifting for gold,
Yeah.
I feel like the eclipse is here to shake things up and to shake us out of complacency. And I see it as the universe's little nudge saying, you know what, you have some big dreams and wishes in your heart, but you've hesitated to take that opportunity when it's presented it. I've offered it to you in a lot of different ways, but you just didn't make the jump. So I'm going to give you a little nudge out of the nest and you're going to fall on your feet, you're going to land on your feet kind of thing. You'll be fine. I've seen so many people where they find out, oh my gosh, I don't have my job, or oh my goodness, the house fell through, or the project didn't happen. And it really was a blessing in disguise. But at the time that they were going through that eclipse energy and they had the rug pulled out from underneath them, I see it like the Tower card in tarot, it felt like their world was crumbling. But really, there was an incredible light and regrowth, like the Scorpio energy, where you've got the phoenix rising from the ashes. There's something beautiful that comes from the eclipses, and they hit us all differently. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be intense, especially if you're aware, and like all of the amazing ladies in this Zoom room. The cool thing is that having an astrologer on your side to pinpoint, hey, psst, this is how the eclipse is affecting you. Heads up, here's what you can do to prepare. Then it doesn't feel like you're getting blindsided. You can see it coming a little more easily.
That's a really good point because if you have a heads up, then you can manage it a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I think mindset plays a big part in that, right? Knowing to expect change, understanding there's going to be a spotlight put on areas where changes are needed. I think there's still a large population of humans who fear change. So the ancients feared the sun not coming back, right? And in our modern era, I do think people feel change, even when they're in a situation that is difficult. There's the saying, the devil I know is better than the one I don't. And a lot of people subscribe to that theory. So change can be terrifying. Absolutely.
What do you think, Katie?
Yeah, I definitely think that they're wild cards, but if you're aware and you're not moving with urgency, you can make really good change in your life.
Yeah. And like Irina said, like when you're on the other end of it, it's good. There's a reason and it's good, but sometimes going through it can feel a little wild. But there's no way through except through. So that's where we're at with this. So, Holly, why don't you start our deeper dive into kind of the 411 on what eclipses mean in astrology?
Yeah, as you're thinking about eclipse season, and I'm going to start with that first phrase, which is season. Eclipse happen in sets. So there's lunar and there's solar, and the time that it takes for those to unfold, we consider that eclipse season because everything is actively changing at that point. Lunar eclipses happen on a full moon, and essentially what's happening is the Earth is casting a shadow on the moon, so it can't reflect light from the sun back to us. And we use that oftentimes to help with our intuition. And the changes that happen during a lunar eclipse or that are triggered by that eclipse tend to be intensely powerful changes that are about culmination, revelation, closure, and release. And these are some of the examples that you all just gave where it is scary. It's scary when a job, a relationship, a project comes to an end, especially if it was on a timeline that was different than you anticipated. And what we find with the promise of the solar eclipse, which is then going to happen on the new moon, is because we've made space in our lives by closing up and releasing things from the lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse promises to bring us new opportunity, new events, new possibilities. And again, some of those can be unexpected or unplanned. The other thing I would say is that these sets of eclipses do belong to a family of that we call the Soros cycle. And these are eclipse cycles that are tracked by NASA. Anybody can go out to the NASA website and look them up. And the reason they're important to us as astrologers is there's a repeating of the location of that eclipse a little over every 18 years. And so by that, the geometry of the sun, the moon, and the earth repeats itself in a way that another eclipse happens in the same sign and degree. And so oftentimes when we're talking to clients about eclipses, we will ask them to take a look back at what happened during the other eclipse in that family. So I would say that you'll find that eclipses throughout your life tend to weave together in one way or another, either thematically or action-wise. Solar eclipses tend to culminate with exterior things happening. The landscape around us changes, the people around us change, the circumstances. Lunar eclipses tend to be more internal and emotionally driven and cultivated. So that's a down and dirty on eclipses that are just important to understand going into every eclipse season.
That's awesome. That is like way better of an overview than I ever could have given. That was awesome. You hit it all.
Great description.
Yeah, that was really good. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
That was perfection.
Because that was so good. Yeah. It's almost like she's thought about this. Yeah. So here's another very common topic that comes up. If you're listening to my podcast over on the audio, or if you're watching this show, you're probably also watching other astrology YouTube shows or podcasts, and you'll probably hear a lot of astrologers talk about, lots of times we use the lunation cycles of the moon to manifest and bring in new things, and use the lunar cycles to plant new seeds at the new moon and complete things at the full moon, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of astrologers will say, do not manifest with an eclipse. The energy is erratic. It is wild. It's not going to turn out how you may think. There's this, there's that. And it's a mixed bag on it. So we thought we would open up this discussion to talk through that. Do you manifest or do you not manifest on an eclipse? And what should you consider if you're going to manifest or not? And so I'm going to kick it over to Katie to get us started on this topic, because she's really good at manifesting with all the lunation cycles. She even said so about the Leo new moon a few weeks ago.
I appreciate that. It's definitely practice in work in progress always, as it is for all of you, I'm sure. But really eclipses are wild cards. And like we talked about, the electromagnetic energy being different than it normally is, it is controversial if you manifest or if you do not manifest. And so I think that it is okay to, if clarity is there. So clarity is everything when it comes to manifesting under an eclipse. You have to know exactly what you're looking for, making sure it aligns with your deepest truths. And it's not just something that you're like, okay, I'm going to go after this by the seat of my pants, because eclipses are also going to bring some change that you're unprepared for. So I think that's why it gets controversial, because you're getting hit with energy that kind of feels ungrounded. How can you ground yourself to make sure that you're manifesting correctly during the eclipses? I would call you to ground. If you're going to want to manifest during the eclipses, you need to be grounded and you need to have that clarity. And using some tools is going to be helpful. Astrology is going to be good, knowing where that energy is showing up just in your chart, what house is lit up, what planets are lit up. And you can use other tools as well if you get into crystals or tarot or anything else. Tools are going to be really helpful to help ground, because your energy yourself might be a little erratic. Using that extra source might help stabilize yourself. And set boundaries with yourself. You're not trying to expect the whole world to change, because something might change on its own to begin with. You just really have to be focused and be aware and not try to move mountains during the eclipses. That being said, the energy is strong. So if you are trying to get something very specific done, it could really work in your favor if you are really clear about what it is that you want.
Really clear and I think really intentional about it, because the nature of eclipse energy is that you could start trying to manifest something and then it might go a little sideways to what you intended. So that's where the clarity and the intentionality really comes in. Does anybody have anything else to add?
Yeah, I
do.
want. Go ahead, Lori, and then I'll go after you.
I was going to say, really important that manifestation is for yourself. It's not
Yes.
about others or for others. And when you're dealing with wild card energy, if you are sending out wild energy to another in any whatever kind of wild emotion, that shit's going to come back on you. So be careful. Intention
Yeah.
is for yourself. Be mindful.
Yeah, and I think you have to be deliberate, right? To that point, the other place where you need to really be mindful is in the context of your astrological chart. Where is this eclipse happening? And what is it touching by area of life, as well as by anything else in your chart that's significant, like a planet or an important point? So if you don't know where that is, I liken it to trying to schedule a successful ski trip in Colorado in December. Sounds like a great idea. Let's go somewhere cold where there's mountains and let's plan to ski. But we don't have any snow yet in December. And so it's not a great plan, right? Because you weren't paying close attention to the landscape. And that's where either learning to identify where in your chart the eclipse is happening, or working with a trusted astrologer, so that as you do start to leverage that energy, you're thinking about it the right way. Because if you're trying to bring something specific to, say, a financial aspect of your life, and the eclipse is happening in a health aspect of your life, you're not going to have the power of that eclipse that you might think that you do, because it's not aligned to the area of your chart where it's happening.
I think this is a really good time for an example. So I have one. And what's really interesting is that Holly had mentioned at the beginning that there are families of eclipses, approximately a little bit over 18 years, when you get these thematic eclipse stories. And I will tell you, 18 years ago, I was not aware of what was going on. I had no real basis or foundation in astrology. And this time I was aware in March with the solar eclipse on March 29th of 2025. That was my birthday. So it hit my sun. I have a stellium, Sun, Mars, and Venus. It hit all of that. And opposite, I've got 3 more planets in Libra, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And all of that was squaring my moon in Capricorn. So I was definitely hit and definitely aware of this eclipse energy in March. And I launched my podcast on March 29th, or actually, I ended up doing it a few days later. But I had this plan to launch the podcast and go out into the world as an astrologer with the energy of this eclipse. And it really wasn't so much about the podcast. It started that way. I had this idea, actually, believe it or not, in February of the Aquarius new moon. I was actually sitting having a pedicure is when this idea came to me. And then I looked at some of my astrology apps and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the new moon day. And I suddenly know exactly what I want to do. I have the idea and I'm literally sitting there in the pedicure chair on my phone, like typing with my thumbs as fast as I can on the notes app on my iPhone of what am I going to do and what's my plan, and actually looking at the calendar and could I do this? This is 8 weeks away. Could I do this? Yeah, I want to do this. So I had this idea. I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes sense because it felt really true to me and my identity as an Aries sun. And this was an Aries solar eclipse. Solar eclipse is a new beginning eclipse. Aries is all about self and identity and who you are. And I really felt an internal drive to do this. And I called Irina and I said, oh my gosh, I really feel this drive to do this. But all the astrologers out there, they say don't manifest on an eclipse. Am I crazy? Like, I don't want to tell anybody else that this is what I want to do right now because be my sounding board. Am I crazy? Should I do this? Or is this not good? And we talked through it and she's, yes, do it. And because it hit me personally, I felt the driving force and it was about me and my identity as who I want to be. Who am I? What am I here to do? And I really felt this huge pull to own the astrologer in me and bring it out. And so I saw the podcast as a way to do it initially. And then this YouTube show was born, but it was with the eclipse is where I said, this is where I'm going to come forth into the world. And a solar eclipse is where it's seen in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think you all are seeing me. We are here. This is what we're doing. So it's interesting. And so then looking back, because I was figuring out, okay, this is a big deal eclipse. When was the last one? When we knew about these Saros cycles, these families of eclipses. So the last time there was an eclipse like this that hit my personal planets, that was the year, it was 2006. And it was when I moved from Connecticut to Ohio. I had a complete identity shift. Again, an Aries solar eclipse, new moon eclipse, where I left my family, I left my friends, I left my job, I left my cats, I left like everything that I knew of who I was on a leap of faith, moving for love. It did work out, thank goodness. I am married to a man. But I went from that life to living with Kevin, who had 4 kids, who I now was playing a very different kind of role than I ever did before. And I had no friends. I had to make friends, brand new community. I had a whole new job, whole new career. This was the first time I went into sales. I had never done that. So I changed everything about my life like this. And I had a whole new identity. And so the theme is there, new identity 19 years ago, and now new identity. And I was not aware of the astrology then, but it fits and it happened. And that's where, to Holly's point, when you're trying to identify patterns, look back when you're coming into an eclipse, and especially if it's touching a personal planet, right? Like for me, 7 of my planets were involved. And my Mercury was not too far off. And Mercury was also right there with the solar eclipse. So Mercury was involved, and this was all about me and my communication and all of those things. So I had Irina's blessing. I didn't tell anybody else until it was launched and it was gone and happening. And here we are. So that's my example that really has driven this whole experience and all of us together. And we'll see where it takes us.
So Alisa, I think it's interesting that you called Irina to talk it through, right? This is a big part of what Irina does in her business, right? Is help guide people through these energetic changes. And then you and I talked about it when we were in Orlando together at a conference.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
asked the same question about your launch date. Do you
That's
think
right, I
it's
did.
crazy that
Mhm.
I'm doing this on
Right.
the eclipse? And I said, no, I don't think it's crazy, right? Because it was very appropriate for how the eclipse was unfolding in your chart. And so to me, it's like being a surfer with a wave, right? Not everybody's ready for a 40-foot wave. But when
Yes.
the eclipse is in the right place at the right time, you're probably more likely to be able to successfully ride that wave than any other time.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
such a good point.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it brings up a good point of like when you are aware of this energy, sometimes it feels scary to still move because it's like
Mhm.
I feel the push to move, but oh my gosh, it feels, do I do it? Do I not do it? How do I do it? And sometimes you still have to move. Sometimes you're being pushed, and the thing to
Yeah.
be, it's a good thing to take that leap of faith and see what unfolds from it.
And that's where you really got to trust your gut, because deep down inside, I knew I had to do it. But it was all this other chatter and all of the mental, oh, but you don't manifest during an eclipse. Oh, but it's going to be wonky and wacky and crazy. But I knew. So if it's this eclipse cycle or a future one or whatever, if trust that, it's so important. Trust your gut.
Who made that rule anyway? And if you're
True.
inspired and the energies are behind you, do it by all means.
Irina, do you want to do your eclipse story now?
Okay.
Or do you want to?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
jump in because it might be interesting. One of the cool things is that there's so many connections when you find circles of community. And I even love this from the energetic perspective. Have you ever noticed you go to a conference or you're at a networking event? And I love to say, angels, please bring the right people across my path. Please help me talk to the right people that I need to connect with. And inevitably, you end up with somebody else who likes astrology, or they're also a teacher or a lawyer. Like you sit, like all the doctors sit here, like all of the lawyers sit here, but we end up tending to gravitate towards each other. This attracts like. And even when we looked at the astrology class that we were all connected with and a part of, there was so much Scorpio energy present. And there are these threads and connections. And the beautiful thing about having those connections and also having complements or opposites, I like to think of it as a compliment, is that you learn more about yourself. And I always giggle because Alisa's sun is opposite, like by sign. She's an Aries and I'm a Libra. So we're like opposites. And then she has the beautiful Capricorn sun, and I have the Capricorn moon, and I have the Cancer moon. So I'm crying, and there's no crying in baseball arena. Stop it.
But I do it nicely because you'll cry more.
I'm teasing.
I know how far to
teasing.
push you to.
Little bit sensitive fans over here. Oh my gosh. But I love it. So we were chatting a little bit before we hopped on, and my eclipse story kind of mirrors hers, both in 2023 and then also in 2005. When you think about that beautiful Saros cycle that Holly so well beautifully said and introduced, and looking at 2005 and even 2023, one of the common themes that I found coming out was where it was identity for Alisa with those solar eclipses, because she's an Aries and it hit her sun. When it hit my sun in that year at the other axis of Libra, what I found was I needed to find a way to be authentically myself within a group and not give my power away, to still be a part of community and bring the peace and diplomacy, but not at the sake of sacrificing who I was. So in 2005, and even backing up a little bit, I had been approached by someone to open up a brick and mortar yoga studio. I was so excited. I said, yes, this would be great. And came to find out that they were really looking for more of a manager than a partner. And I called them out on it. And they said, oh, yeah, you know what? You're right. And I was like, oh, no. And there really wasn't any malevolence behind it, but it felt like a knife in my heart. It just felt like such a betrayal. And when 2005 came around, there was this opportunity where the stars literally aligned, and the eclipse was on my sun. It was squaring my Saturn in Leo in the 9th house. And it said, you know what? It's time for you to step into the role of teacher. It's time for you to open up your own space. It's time to be in front of the group. And it was amazing. I had the energy and the drive to break away from that community where I felt so small and I felt so undervalued. And I said, I need to start aligning with what feels right in my heart, because some of the things that were being taught or said just weren't driving. There was something that was off. So here was this wonderful opportunity. When you talk about manifesting with the eclipses. And at that point, the little I knew about astrology, I definitely wasn't riding that wave. And I love that analogy, Holly. Oh my God, that was perfect. The 40-foot wave, catching it. Somehow, miraculously, I caught it and I was able to have that amazing studio. Then when 2023 hit, that eclipse was, oh my gosh, right on top of my sun, like just a degree off. And really was 30 minutes. What ended up happening was I had this incredible opportunity to become more visible. I had hired a marketing agency and they were working on my branding and working on my messaging. But what ended up happening was that Leo reared its interesting little head. And knowing now, because I was thinking, oh, Leo, what a great moon to sign a contract on. P.S. This is for another episode, but Holly had a wonderful point. Do not sign contracts on fixed moons, especially not Leo moon, because here's how it played out. Every time I would try to stand up and say, you know what, that email or this branding and I was publishing a moon journal, I said, this really doesn't seem like me. It's not who I am. I would receive back, oh, don't question our expertise and authority. If you ask questions, then it means you don't trust us or value our expertise. You can't ask questions. And I found myself spiraling and saying, oh my God, I didn't mean to disrespect you. I didn't want to offend you. I honor you as the expert. I hired you. I'm paying you a lot of money to do this. And it just wasn't going well because there was that Leo clash. And I found that I really had to fight to maintain my authenticity in that contract. And it took me about, and this is something else, like with eclipses, it's not, oh, it's going to happen on the day. No, you feel the lead up to it 3 to 6 months beforehand, 3 to 6 months afterwards. And it even 18 months after that eclipse that hit my sun directly, I was still pulling myself out of an identity that somebody else was trying to box me in. This is what sells. This is what people want. Talk like this, do this, be that. And I couldn't do it. And the thrill and the adventure of getting through to the other side, and somebody was mentioning this earlier, it's uncomfortable getting pushed. Katie, you were talking about that, getting pushed out of the nest. But what I found is that when I look back, I know that I maintained my integrity and authenticity of who I am. And my son being in the 11th house, there is that authenticity that's so important, that Aquarian vibe that the 11th house brings. And your son that, really in many ways connects to a Leo energy of where are you shining? And so when I am in groups, it is important that I have that integrity, that I'm not putting on airs or false voices or letting somebody else for me. I can't stomach it. I have to question. So it was an uncomfortable cycle to go through. But what I learned was that in partnerships, especially when I'm in groups and communities, I can't forget who I am because it comes at a great cost. And that's something pretty powerful, I think, that anyone can learn, and hopefully not the hard way, like I did that year.
And that is really hard for a Libra sun. So Irina and I have talked about this a lot because we are opposites with our suns and our moons. And whereas she has a harder time stepping up and advocating for herself, and I'm like, nope, I'm here and I need this and I need that. And my friends need this and we're going to do this. And she is, you can do that? I'm like, yes, and you need to do that for yourself. So it's funny, like kind of the whole opposites thing, like opposites versus complements. Find somebody that's opposite you every now and then because you can really help each other grow. And it is very hard for a Libra sun. And Irina has taught me a lot about chilling my own self out a little bit and, looking out for others. But I also think it's very interesting that she and I were connected with this same exact eclipse cycle. And for me, it was all about stepping out and being seen in this new identity of who I was. And with Irene, and I'm the Aries sun, and Irina is the Libra sun, hers was all about how am I going to be within the context of all of my groups and the others,
Mhm.
because Libra, whereas Aries is the me, Libra is the we. So it's just very interesting the different approaches and messages and learnings from the same eclipse cycle. It's just wild.
Yeah. Irina, it's like you're learning to do the we without losing me. That's not all Libras are probably here to learn it in that way, but for you, it's what you're learning.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? All right. Any other thoughts on this particular yin and yang eclipse example? All right. So I think we're going to move on to one other really cool eclipse topic. Lori, why don't you introduce the idea of a prenatal eclipse and what that means?
Sure. So the prenatal eclipse is the last solar eclipse that occurs before your birth. And this is typically about anytime like 6 months prior to your birth, or anytime from 6 months before up to your birth. And the reason this is important is because that prenatal eclipse sets the tone, and where it falls in your chart, in your natal chart, whatever that house is, this tends to be a theme in your life, and it tends to be a big area of focus and a great opportunity for emotional, spiritual growth and expansion. So for anybody that's listening, if you would like to know how to find your prenatal eclipse, you can go to astroseek.com, and they have a tab for, I think the tab says lunations. It might say solar eclipses or eclipses. And just tab through and find that eclipse that took place 6 months prior to your birth. And generally, the focus is on solar eclipses. Irina does have a really good take on prenatal lunar eclipse too. And we'll get to that in a minute. But where that eclipse falls in your chart, it's a big theme in your life. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my prenatal eclipse and how that theme has played out in subsequent eclipses. So I was born in March of 72, and my prenatal eclipse was at 25 Capricorn, which was 2 degrees from my ascendant. So that, because it's so close to my first house, that energy really gets pulled into the first house. So I read that as a first house prenatal eclipse. And so first house themes are important in my life. And similar to Irina, but a little different because I'm a Pisces, I have struggled with having a strong sense of self and having boundaries and knowing who I am and being that person in groups. And I would say it probably took me about 40 years to really start to get solid with those lessons and feel a much stronger sense of myself. I had an eclipse. So this was in 1999. An eclipse hit on my south node or my north node in the first house. The eclipse was in Aquarius. This was a lunar eclipse. And at that time, I'd been having terrible back pain and was having a hard time being functional. And everything came to a head right around that eclipse. And I found myself in a position where I literally could not get up off the floor because I was in so much pain. And at the time had no health insurance. So I was not seeking to get diagnosed because this is when pre-existing conditions was a thing. And if I got diagnosed without insurance, then it was going to be a whole lot of trouble and a whole lot of money. So this eclipse hits, I'm on the ground, I go to the hospital, and they tell me I'm pain seeking and send me home. And they thought I was looking for drugs. So for the next year, I was bearing through this pain and was going to chiropractic and physical therapy and really just not going anywhere to get it diagnosed, just putting a Band-Aid on it. And the following March, actually it was the following February, the next eclipse came along, and this one was a solar eclipse. And it hit also in my first house, not directly on the node. It was a little bit off of it, but It was an eclipse, a solar eclipse with Uranus conjunct. Unexpected things. Uranus is surprise. And Uranus also rules electricity, as we all know. Lo and behold, exactly 1 month after this solar eclipse, I was finding myself paralyzed at night. I literally could not roll over in bed, no feeling from my waist down. I was having numbness and tingling in my legs. And I called my physical therapist and she said, you have to go to the hospital today. I'm very concerned. Like you can't put this off anymore. And insurance had kicked in about a week before this event. So I went to the hospital and was diagnosed with a spinal tumor. And it was literally inside the spinal cord and pressing on the spinal cord. And it was about the size of a golf ball. So Uranus rules electricity. What's your nervous system?
Mm-hmm.
It is the electricity, the energy, the transmissions in your body. So this eclipse culminated, this tumor put me to the point where I was getting paralyzed. I had surgery and learned how to walk again and really was in recovery over the next 6 months. But that eclipse put me on the trajectory to eventually go to nursing school, which is a whole other set of eclipses when I went to nursing school. But prior to that point, I'd been very anti-modern medicine and I was into herbal medicine and that sort of thing. So this eclipse, it was very difficult, but it completely changed the trajectory of my life. And that first house theme, it's all about honing me and changing me. And it changed me through my physical body. And the one thing I forgot to mention is the sign that's on the cusp of the house for that prenatal eclipse. That is how you can work with the energy to find that growth that prenatal eclipse energy can bring to you. So my sign there is Capricorn. I have Aquarius in that house also, but Capricorn is Earth. And so the way that I'm going to grow through this first house is through physical things in my body, things that I do, things on the material plane. If it was an air sign, it might have played out a little different.
That is really interesting. And especially the fact that you had such a dramatic change to your physical body when your prenatal eclipse was within, what, 2 degrees of your ascendant. Talk about the power of the ascendant. That is truly like, that's why it is so important. And why oftentimes, even if you don't know what your birth time is, astrologers can help you back into what is the exact birth time to find out what is the exact degree of your ascendant, because that truly makes a huge difference, not only with prenatal eclipse, but with transits. I could tell you stories myself of stuff like, but it's wild. It's wild when you have something big happening with the degree of your self, like your actual physical body, like that degree. That's potent. Wow, Lori. My gosh, that's a heck of an example.
It's a great example too of the eclipse doesn't create a tumor. This eclipse said, you have to pay attention to this now. You have to deal with this now. You can't keep putting it off. Raising that things are going to change and unfold and they can't be ignored.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It doesn't cause anything.
Right.
But the energy is there and we have to pay attention. And deep down, Lori, you knew you needed to deal with it, but you were like, oh, but insurance and this, you're like, I just can't. But you had to. And thank goodness the timing worked out.
Yes.
And one of the things that I found was so fascinating, Lori, too, that you also mentioned, that was prior to this experience. And Holly, I love the way that you said that it wasn't the astrology, it wasn't the aspects that created this within your body. It was trying to get your attention. And just like the eclipse also said, psst, look at what is available with modern Western medicine.
Yes.
When you had your heart maybe closed to it to a certain, how it opened up a whole other trajectory in your life that opened up other opportunities, I feel like, for you. And I think of that Uranian energy, the breaking loose to break free, breakdown for breakthrough, and the rebel that you truly are in your heart, that you were able to kind of step into something brand new. And it's a perfect example of, we may not have thought, here's manifesting with the moon, like Katie was talking about too. We may not have expected, like if you spoke to the Lori prior to that experience and say, guess what? One day you're going to be working in modern Western medicine. You'd be like, oh, heck no. Never. And here you are. But it was at Eclipse that you were willing to shift the way you looked at life. You didn't fight it, because sometimes I feel like these dreams, these callings are placed in our heart, and we think, oh, surely it's going to manifest in this nice linear path, A, B, C, X, Y, Z, to get me to the next level or place or goal. And inevitably it doesn't. Like Alisa, the eclipse brought you across the country. You left, you took that leap of faith on love. And that's something that if you ask the Alisa a few years prior to that or a decade before, oh, would you leave your life, your
No
everything
way.
built for some guy? I mean,
No
the
way.
most romantic of us all. So it's the eclipse that shakes us out of complacency. It's where we've been hunkered down at, oh, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I love that quote too, Holly, better the devil you know than you don't know. It's my Irish grandmother coming out. But sometimes the universe is, no, you need to know the devil you don't know. Go. Better.
So Kevin is the devil then in this situation?
Yes, the devil.
Don't tell him we called him the devil.
That's a secret.
Oh, don't worry. He'll be watching this eventually. He'll see it.
Edit that.
Oh, that's so funny. Irina, will you also talk about the vibrations through the water in the womb? Because that's got a really strong point about that.
And that's one of the things. It's funny because I definitely bring an intuitive aspect into this. And even like when I read a chart, I'll get an intuitive hit and I'll hear our astrology teacher's voice in my ear going, where's it in the chart? I got to find it. There's different ways that we all approach reading astrology. And most astrologers really focus on the prenatal solar eclipse because that's a seed or a container, a mission of sorts that our soul is here to accomplish. I do have a little rebellious nature myself. And I'm like, what about the lunar prenatal eclipse? Because mine does happen within 5 degrees of my ascendant in the first.
Oh, wow.
Probably
Wow.
why the lunar prenatal eclipse is important to me. And I pay attention to it is because I feel like it also brings forward the ancestral story, just like the South Node, gifts we can access or emotional baggage we bring into this lifetime, but really the family karmic story. And a lot of times we have to, like, what's in the way is the way. And so we have to sift through that and work with that so that we can make room and make space for the solar or the natal promise, like where we're going. If we don't deal with all this stuff, it's going to be hard to have the space to welcome the new. So with that being said, if you think about it, the beautiful way that Lori described it, when we have the eclipses and that electromagnetic frequency is blocked and shifted to a certain degree, there's other frequencies and energies that are being imprinted upon us. And if you think of how sound travels through water so much more easily than through air, when we're in our mother's womb, in that amniotic fluid, to me, and this is more of an intuitive hit, that's why I opened with it the way I did. I don't necessarily have the research to back this up, but see how it resonates for you. I truly feel that there was an imprint, just like they talk about oh my goodness, the geometric shapes in the crop circles and the crop grids that just pop up. There are some theories that it's because of sound that they're created. And the whole universe is built on sacred geometry. So what if there was a sound that went off? And if you get into the beautiful practice of studying sound and how it affects people, it's called somatic, Cymatics. And even the beautiful work that Dr. Masaru Emoto did, the hidden messages in water, if you Google that, you'll see the images. Like what happens when you play Beethoven's music? You get a beautiful crystal. What happens when you play like really hate-based really intense heavy metal music. Nothing against heavy metal. You get like a misshapen, or you get water from a toxic nuclear waste site. It's a misshapen crystal versus a water crystal. You look at it that was blessed by a priest or a monk, and it's a beautiful shape. So you start to see that when there's fluid involved, whether it's water or whether it's amniotic fluid, the crystalline shapes within us are reformed. And so the way we think about ourselves, Holly, you were talking about mindset, and Katie, intention when manifesting. Oh my God, that vibrational level of manifesting adds so much more to it. So what if when we were in our mother's womb, both the prenatal lunar eclipse and prenatal solar eclipse imprinted within us this message? And sometimes I think of it a little bit like, if you ever work with crystals, I love Superman, like the original with Christopher Reeves, and he gets the crystal, right? And he goes to his crystalline palace and he puts that beautiful quartz crystal in, and he gets all the data and the history of his family that had been lost, otherwise been stored in that crystal. The crystalline parts of us, what data have we carried through lifetimes that the eclipses can help us unpack? Oh, I get so excited. So anyway, I'll end there, and you can take what resonates with you and leave the rest behind.
I just thought it was so cool, the idea that the energy vibrates differently going through the water of the womb rather than once we are here and having it come through air. And that, because I'll be honest, when I first was hearing about this prenatal eclipse stuff, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And I'm open to it because I'm open to just about anything astrologically. But I was, how does that really work? You're not here yet. What's the deal? But really, it was when you said that the other day about the vibrations being different through the water. I feel like there's validity in that. I don't have any research either, and I won't go do any research because that's not who I am. But I love it. We'll put Holly on that. She's really good at research, the Scorpio. But I loved that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So any other closing thoughts about eclipses or anything else that we haven't discussed that we really should tell our audience about eclipses?
Yeah, I feel like it's just important to remember, and I know Holly mentioned this at the start when she was overviewing what eclipses are, but they happen in two sections twice a year. So this is always happening. It's not something that just happens once in your life. It's happening 4 times a year, twice in the beginning of the year, twice at the end of the year. This is not something to be afraid of. This is not something to go whole haywire about. Knowledge helps you understand things, but knowledge can also make things feel a little scary. So just remembering that this is always happening. This happens to everybody in the entire world. It's not just, oh my gosh, the world is ending for me. The person next to you also feels this way, whether they are aware of the energy or not. There's something happening in their life as well. So just sit back for a second, observe, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. I promise.
That's a good point. And the other thing too that I think is important, it is happening for everybody all the time. It's also not happening so personally for everybody at the same time, because the eclipses, where they occur, because Holly said it's approximately every 18, 19 years is where you'll have the eclipse happen in the same general area. It's because eclipses happen right where the south node and north node are. That's the nodes of the moon. That's the points where the sun and the moon's orbits intersect. So naturally, that is where eclipses happen. And the nodes actually move backward through the zodiac. And I think it's about a year and a half in each sign is what it is. And then it goes all the way around in a little over 18 years. So what that means is, like right now, the eclipses that are upon us here in another couple of weeks, they're on the Virgo Pisces axis. For the previous 18 months, it was Aries Libra, which is why Irina and I had our personal stories. The Virgo Pisces people are going to be feeling this now before the air. See, so Lori's up. So we'll all be helping Lori through this. And like all of us were helping me and Irina through the last one. And before that, it was the Taurus Scorpio. So, I mean, it's, if you just have that understanding that not everybody is getting impacted so intensely at the same time, And I think it's really important to just treat everybody around you with kid gloves as we get really close to the eclipses themselves, because not everybody's going to be as outgoing and open about what they're going through. Some people, especially like some of those Scorpio moons out there, they're not going to tell you they're hurting, but they're hurting. And, it's just make sure you're treading lightly over the next month or so with those around you, because you just don't know. So, all right, I think that's a good place to end there. I will tell you that I referenced Holly a second ago as the researcher of the group. She is our Scorpio, and she goes deep into everything. And I'm actually going to leave a link to her blog in the show notes, because she wrote a really nice blog post about eclipses. And she also has a few other offerings for sale on her website that I want to have her share a little bit about what she has to offer.
Yeah, thanks for that. Lots of Scorpio energy on this call. Though I am a Scorpio stellium, I have 4 points and planets on the very bottom of my chart, which is where people like to research. Researchers are born there astrologically. So yeah, thank you for including the link to the blog. My website is mavenastrology.com. And so I'll have the blog post out there for everyone. I'll also announce it on Instagram at Maven Astro. And then I'll have some additional deep dive materials for purchase. So there'll be a pay version of the blog where it goes deeper into the topic, as well as a quick reference guide so that the layperson can use free tool to go out and identify where an eclipse is happening in their chart, what that part of the chart means, etc. So you can do a little bit more research and application on your own until you're ready to have a conversation with an astrologer, which I strongly encourage at some point everyone do. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely check out Holly's blog, check out everything, check out all of our websites. We all would love to connect with you. Like I said, if you are ready to take that leap, we all are available for chart readings, especially going into energy that's a little more intense, perhaps than normal the next few weeks. So I'll have everybody's website in the show notes and contact information. This has been so much fun. As usual, I just have the best time when we all get together and talk astrology. So thank you all so much for being here. And to the YouTube audience, thank you so much for watching and listening. And if you have an eclipse story, please leave it in the comments. We would love to hear it. The best way for all of us to expand our knowledge base and our astrology practice is for more examples and also bridging more connection. I'm really looking to build a community here with everybody, all of you listeners. So definitely drop some notes in the comments. And we are just so excited to see you next time and to connect. So thank you so much. All right, take care, everybody.